Thank you very much.
You know, there's a few rules in public speaking. One of them is never go after the really high-end talent. So what I want to talk about a journey and what a journey we've been on. What a journey we've been on with Postgres. And a lot of what I'd like to share with you today is where I see Postgres headed and where we've come from. And I think a good way to think about a journey is to contrast it with a trip, right? So, think about a trip for a second. I think probably the most essential difference between a journey and a trip is really time, isn't it, at the end of the day? A trip is actually important, but usually trips, if you think about it, are relatively short in duration. And they may have a plan. You might start a trip with a plan. How many of you are taking vacation or at some point here? Coming up vacation, holiday sometime? Are you on so who came here on a trip? Right? Trips are actually usually have a plan, but they're pretty defined time frame. And for the most part, when you take a trip, while things may go wrong, you don't really expect things to go wrong. And usually somewhere in the trip, there's something really exciting, something really important, something really fun happening. I think most of the time we think about a trip, there's a big event or something really positive that's going to happen in the middle of it. And then, the trip is over, and you move on, and you just kind of go about the rest of your day, the rest of your business. A journey is a little bit different, though, isn't it? In a journey, journeys often have a plan. We start with this notion of something that we're undertaking, some direction that we're heading in, some big goal, something important we're trying to achieve, and in recognition that it's going to take some time. I also think that when we go on a journey, we don't expect everything to always work out. We know that on a journey, there are going to be things that go incredibly well. There are going to be moments of great elation, great joy, great satisfaction. And then there are going to be moments of pain and pressure, sadness, maybe despair. But we kind of accept that condition because we know we're on a path to creating something, to doing something that's far more important, far more meaningful, and far more significant. And now that I've celebrated 11 years at Enterprise DB, I think so much more about the work that we're doing with Postgres and in EDB as being part of a journey. And many of you have been part of that journey too in your use of Postgres and in your work with us. It was 10 years ago, actually, I think, 2000, a little less, 9 years ago, 2010, that we opened our first office here in the Netherlands. How many of you were here with EDB 10 years ago when we opened in the Netherlands? I know our friends from Nibble. Thank you for that too, by the way. You were a big part of getting us started here. So I want to talk to you about the context of the Postgres journey and the EDB journey because I think it's important to set it in context. We're in a really remarkable time of change in technology, and a remarkable point of expansion in the way technology is getting used. And so I think it's easy to lose track of those things that come to us that are part of our journey and those things that really are more like the trip and short-term in nature. So if you think a little bit about the history of Postgres, and I won't go into all of the details, Postgres has got a fascinating and rich history. It started back in university with Mike Stonebreaker in 1986. And I'm delighted to announce, I think some of you may already know this, that after really over 30 years of being disconnected from Postgres after it left university, Mike Stonebreaker has decided to join EDB as an advisor in helping us as we think about the next steps for Postgres and for the company. So I was delighted he came to and spoke at Postgres Vision and talked about his journey through the early years with Postgres. It was a fascinating talk. For those of you who haven't ever seen that, I think we did record that, and you should be able to find that online. But so Postgres started back in '86, and then it was a full 10 years after that that the open source project formed around this great technology that had been developed and built in university. So, we think of, I'm sure many of you might think of that as being one continuous set of activities. In fact, it wasn't. It was kind of disjointed. Interestingly, for those of you who know Bruce Momjian, who's one of the core team members of the Postgres community, also a member of the staff here at EDB, the first time he met Mike Stonebreaker was 2 weeks ago at Postgres Vision. Kind of fascinating, isn't it? So the journey of our project, of our open source community, has really taken some interesting twists and turns. And I'm not going to go through the whole history of Postgres. There have been some really important milestones on that continuum. But I will talk about one that kind of is striking and I think highlights some of the unique characteristics of what journeys look like. Mike Stonebreaker, by the way, in his talk went through a really interesting sequence of very high moments and very low moments. And I think it lent a lot of validity to this notion of a journey. But one of the things that's striking to me about Postgres is a little thing that happened along the way that may have seemed somewhat insignificant, but from my point of view is quite significant. I joined the company 11 years ago. As many of you will recall, if you go back to that time, 2008, you'll remember that MySQL was kind of the most popular open source database at that time. And enjoyed a lot of popularity, particularly with developers, as you may recall, was purchased by Sun Microsystems. Anybody remember how much Sun paid for MySQL? $1 billion, yeah, billion US dollars. Think about that. $1 billion. I was at Red Hat at the time, and I remember the market declaring that the open source database, the open source database competitive landscape, it's over. There's no more opportunity for an open source database company to emerge of any prominence. MySQL won, they got $1 billion, and it was kind of game over. I was at Red Hat at the time. And that was a energizing moment for me because I didn't believe it was true. In fact, as much as MySQL had accomplished at that time, I don't think, and I didn't believe that it actually accomplished the most important things, which was truly about enterprise adoption and enterprise value in an open source database. I knew a little bit about Postgres at that time. We had, for those of you who were around Red Hat for any amount of time, you'll recall, for some time, we actually had a Red Hat Postgres database. Anybody remember that? That goes way back. So I've been with open source now for 20 odd years. So I knew a little bit about Postgres, and I knew enough to know that Postgres was originally designed really in the image of an enterprise class database like an Oracle and some of the other more prolific databases of its time. But that it really hadn't enjoyed the popularity, it never really received the attention that I felt was commensurate with the actual capability and competency of that technology. And so in the face of Sun buying MySQL for $1 billion, I choose to leave Red Hat, a great job and a great career, to come and lead EDB 11 years ago. And I'm delighted to say that proved to be the best decision of my career and my life. And you guys are evidence of the importance that Postgres plays in the global technology landscape today. But in 2005, Windows Server, a few years before I joined, 2005, Postgres ported to support Windows Server. This seemed like a little thing at the time, unless you thought about the world of the developer. We were developers doing most of their development work at that point in time, right? On Windows machines. So Postgres, where MySQL was winning was with developers. They were winning with developers because they operated simply on a platform that developers developed on. Now, there are other reasons why MySQL did well then, but Postgres wasn't there. And if you think about this journey and this continuum we're on with Postgres, a little thing like a port to a popular, prominent operating system platform where developers lived seemed like maybe insignificant at the time, but it really was the starting point for so many opportunities for Postgres. And I think if you look at the history and continuum of Postgres, there are a lot of examples like that. But what you won't see is one giant moment. One moment where this, all this massive heat and light was poured onto Postgres. Some people look at that as, maybe might be a negative for Postgres. I think it's a true positive, but I think the way we have to look at it is we're on a journey. And here's what that journey has resulted in. So this slow, steady ascension of Postgres, almost kind of alongside this fantastical growth of new technologies, of NoSQL databases, and of all the various Hadoop and scale-out databases. Really, really important technologies. Really, really important niche technologies. This is the evidence of Postgres success. It represents all the companies. This is just an example of the companies around the world who rely today on Postgres for workloads across a breadth of activities that they employ in their companies. Here's another important statistic. Postgres, #1 most popular database, is rated by DB Engines in 2018. Interesting to note that Postgres was also the #1 database as rated by DB Engines in 2017. If you look at how many of you follow Stack Overflow, every year Stack Overflow does some survey work of the developer community that surrounds them. Stack Overflow in 2000, this is the 2019 survey, Postgres is the second most popular database amongst all databases. And this has been a consistent pattern over the years. So think about the journey. This is evidence of us riding into a point of, a high point in our journey. And it's evidence of the importance and the impact that we've made by continuing to bring capabilities to Postgres. 17 is the number of companies, the decline in the number of companies on Gartner's Magic Quadrant for operational database management systems between 2015 and 2018. Think about that. Go back to 2015, what was being said? I mean, how many of you were here listening to the talk about NoSQL technologies? Do you remember what was being said? Because I do. I was here then. Right? NoSQL will take over the world. There's no more need for relational databases, right? Who remembers that? Do you remember those conversations? You'll never need another relational database. That's dated technology. It's inefficient technology. It's not effective. NoSQL will take over the world. A lot of those companies that you see that are now roadkill. And today, you see companies on the right that remain. I'm very proud to say that Enterprise DB for the last 7 years has been part of Gartner's Magic Quadrant. Alongside the behemoths of the industry. Why is that? That's another demonstration and recognition of the power and importance of Postgres as a technology and how it's serving enterprises. By the way, the companies that disappeared from Gartner's Magic Quadrant aren't bad technologies or bad companies. They're important specialty database technologies. 38 represents little insight on our company. This is 38 consecutive quarters of subscription revenue growth for Enterprise DB. That's almost 10 years of sequential consecutive growth. That's the best evidence that I can share that for data we have in the company of how important Postgres is to enterprises and governments. You're voting by using more of that tech. It's not hard. It's not easy to get here. It's hard to do. And when you look across the landscape of data management and database companies, especially some of the newer technology companies, they're bleeding money in profitability. They're spending extraordinary amounts of money on sales and marketing to do what? Buy business. On the promise that some point those businesses, that'll catch up and be profitable. They're great technologies. They're specialty technologies, and you shouldn't lose track of that. We've had 38 consecutive quarters of growth. You'll also notice the acceleration of that growth in the last 4 quarters. Postgres is relevant. 42% represents another number, just it's an interesting statistic. As of June 30th, that was our year-over-year subscription revenue growth as a point of interest. 102 represents the number of Fortune 500 companies that we work with who are using Postgres in their enterprise across a landscape of use cases and workloads. I'll share that in a minute. These are the companies, some of those companies, and they're represented around the world. 337 is the number of Fortune 500 companies, or I'm sorry, of Global 2000 companies who are also using EDB Postgres around the world. So Postgres has now matured to be a trusted database platform for companies of all shapes and sizes around the world. 4,000 is the number of total customers that we have in the business today. And so when I think about, putting this in the context of a journey, you start to understand that the only way a technology is truly relevant is when it's used and adopted by enterprise. And you're seeing that happen more and more, and you guys represent that. You may remember last year, about this time, we launched our migration portal. How many of you have even tried the migration portal? Nice. So the migration portal helps our customers move from Oracle to Postgres. Since we launched that, there have been 1.7 million Oracle DDL constructs that have been analyzed by our migration portal. When we started this in about June, July of 2018, we were achieving approximately 25% success rate of migrations that required no manual intervention. As of July or June of 2019, we were up to 80% of those migrations required no manual intervention. 5.6 million downloads. That's the number of downloads that EDB has done over the past 3 years. It represents roughly, I think, 7,000 or 8,000 software downloads per week. And that's just at EDB. The number of users of Postgres is accelerating today. And we're proud to be part of that ecosystem and helping you consume Postgres easier. $4.6 billion US. That's a tricky number. It's a big number. $4.6 billion represents the loss in market cap by the large Hadoop players from the point of their high as listed on US stock exchanges and their price as of 2 weeks ago. $4.6 billion of lost market cap. Why is that? Important technology, but specialty technology. I love this quote. How many of you read about Matt Acey? Do you know Matt Acey? He's been a kind of a prolific blogger and open source guy. He said, Postgres keeps having a moment, like for the past 5 years. That was 2 years ago, he said that. I guess it's 7 years and counting. And if you look at the survey that DB Engines does, you see below here, and I think this was as of June 2019, you see Postgres, 4th most popular database here by their ranking as of June. This idea that Postgres, has continued to show this steady, reliable progression. This is what a journey looks like. It's not a short-term phenomenon. This is a 30-plus year phenomenon. And some people can look at that and say, gee, that doesn't sound very interesting. Maybe it's a little boring. But think about it. It's powerful. It speaks to something more meaningful. It speaks to something more strategic and more impactful. So I want to encourage you to separate facts from feelings. Now, this is a concept that I use. I often use this at home with my wife, Alicia, and it never goes well. Don't try it at home. This is great. It works great in business, but it's awful otherwise. But I've just shown you a lot of data, and right now we're at a really interesting time in the evolution of data management and databases in particular. And I described there is a shocking amount of economics being pumped into the market to convince you that the newest technologies and the newest databases are what you need at the expense of all the other things you've considered, at the expense of proven open source general purpose databases like Postgres. And you know what? There's truth in some of that for some specialized use cases. We all know that's true. But don't get caught. I caution you to not get caught in the emotion, the feeling that you're getting from all that money that's being thrown at you. And I can promise you, EDB is a relatively small company. The Postgres community is far more interested in building excellent core technology. And arguably, for those of you who are part of the community or community members, Postgres, doesn't do a whole lot of self-promotion. Would you agree? As a community? I think that's a reality. EDB is a relatively small voice in that landscape and ecosystem up against behemoths. Those $4.6 billion market cap that got lost. A lot of that money spent on convincing you that you don't need anything but these new specialized technologies. So I just urge you to think carefully about separating facts about what's necessary to run your business and those feelings. And it's easy to get distracted. And the reality, as you all know, is Postgres is everywhere today. But let's try to put a little bit of a face on that. Postgres, one of the top 3 technologies that are currently running in containers and running on Docker, just to draw your attention to that bar. So we know the proliferation of container technology is part of enterprise infrastructure and enterprise strategy, and particularly as it relates to the deployment of resources in cloud, in hybrid cloud, and in multi-cloud. And to put it in some perspective, this is what that survey from Datadog looked like 5 years ago. An interesting progression of Postgres as a go-to technology running on Docker. Postgres is supported around the world. It's in every continent. To give you kind of a snapshot into that, this is a picture of EDB's business around the world. So if you look at our business, a little more than half of our business comes out of the North American market, predominantly the United States. Another 29% of our business comes from the Asia market and 20% from the European market. So Postgres is well represented around the world. And Postgres, as you likely know, is now prominent in every major industry. This is a representation of EDB's business. And you see 30% of EDB's subscription business comes out of technology, high-tech or technology companies. Think about software tech, hardware tech, companies that are centered in building something technical. 27% of our business comes out of the financial services industry. And so financial services looks like commercial banking, consumer banking, insurance, stock exchanges, trading companies. About 27% of our business comes from there. 24% of our business comes from governments. And governments includes, if you look inside of North America, heavy weighted towards Department of Defense, but also increasingly in North America, here in this region as well, in the civilian government agencies. And now, more and more, we see in state and local government and educational institutions, about 24% of our business. 9% of EDB's business today comes out of the telecommunications market. And that includes both wireless carriers, landline carriers, cable companies, and a variety of organizations that we think of as telco. That doesn't add up to 100. The other 10% are cut across many industries. So Postgres is used and valued in every segment, in every category, in every region in the world. And we see Postgres now being used by more and more workloads. And the way we think about that, we divide the landscape of workloads into this triangle, into three categories. We talk about systems of record, which you can think of as kind of the traditional single source of truth, the ERP system. They're typically quite transactionally focused, transactionally oriented. Then we look at systems of analysis, so you think about data warehousing, data marts. We would put reporting, applications for reporting in that bucket. And then also systems of engagement, which we would typically think of as those things that front to a customer. It might be a database backing a website where customers interact. So today, Postgres is used in every one of those areas. And what's notable here, I put up there just for interest, the percentage of our business breaks down. A little over 50% of our customers report to us they use us for systems of record. That's not particularly surprising. It's a little bit surprising that more than that, 63% report that they use EDB in systems of analysis, and 17% report that they use EDB for systems of engagement. So really impactful use of Postgres across every workload. I will note, this is a $35 to $40 billion industry, and the grayed out corners have significance because I've spent some time sharing where do the specialty databases live. They live in every one of these categories in that kind of gray corner. Important technologies supporting important specialized needs. We see those often as complementary to Postgres. And you'll see, interestingly, we recently published a report about Postgres performance in document workloads. Really powerful results. I think it's probably the single most comprehensive study that's been done about Postgres in a performance benchmark against MongoDB. And if you look across the range of applications, really worth a read. I think there'll be a talk about that later today. If you look across the landscapes, Postgres performs 4 to 14 times faster than Mongo. And this is just a little-known truth. I'm sure Mongo serves needs in some of the more specialized areas really effectively. But in many of the mainstream workloads, it's not as well known how strong Postgres is for supporting document workloads in a SQL relational context, which is an added advantage. Why is that happening? We have an incredibly vibrant, independent community, unlike some of the projects that we talk about. Postgres is not run or controlled by any single company, and I think that's powerful. I think that's one of the best attributes of what makes Postgres great and what will continue to make Postgres better. This is similar to the Red Hat, the Linux community, which is an independent open source community. And I think we get, as users of technology, we get so much more out of projects when they operate like this. For example, and I think many of you will know this, Postgres community is governed by 5 core team members. They act as kind of the oversight for the project, broadly speaking. Two of those core team members work at Enterprise DB, Dave Page and Bruce Momjian. Some of you guys know them. And they provide a lot of insight and guidance both to our company, but more importantly to the community. If you go to the next level down, the Postgres community has approximately 30 major contributors. Some of those major contributors are also committers, and they're all over the world. I think EDB has a little over a handful of those major committers work at the company. And then there are hundreds of developers and contributors who are working to make Postgres better every day. And what makes this tech so powerful is that diversity and that distribution, and the fact that that's not controlled or commanded by a single company. We're really proud to be a major contributor and supporter of the Postgres community. It's been a foundation of and a value for EDB since its inception, and certainly since I joined the company. It's not easy for companies to engage with open source projects and to be value-add contributors. We can, name a cloud vendor who's using Postgres but also contributing to the community. You won't name one because they don't contribute to the community. They're users of the technology. So we're proud of being contributors. That allows us to bring more to the table to you. It allows us to help guide where the product tech goes. But this community is one of the reasons Postgres is so strong. And I think when we look forward now, on the journey, we're going to continue to see, as we have seen, Postgres become more and more relevant to enterprise. We're in the middle of a massive transformation in enterprise and government that's centered on the use and leverage of technology to create better results, better performance, better operations. And that's all come about as we've brought the cost and difficulty of acquiring technology down. It's easier to get platforms. It's easier to get compute power. It's easier to write apps. It's easier to get insight and information than ever before. In the best way, it means that we're enabling not just IT experts to create value through technology in our environments and in our organizations, but we let everyone in the organization drive that change. And it's because of that that the economics of the old proprietary software world are no longer valid. They don't work anymore for organizations, and you guys are all evidence of that. So open source has followed this very natural ascension, and Postgres, I think, for the first time really in the history of Postgres, is being recognized for its strength as a technology and its importance in that transformation that companies are going through. And we certainly are seeing that. A lot of the numbers I put up earlier about EDB's performance are a reflection of that. So the future will continue to be about Postgres. The way that looks inside of EDB and the way we're trying to help enterprise customers is to continue to accelerate development in areas that are important to you. Our biggest customers have long used us in a variety of applications. And to be fair, most of you start using Postgres in areas that are less essential to the core business operations. And we've seen many, and we see this especially in some of our financial service customers who've started us in their kind of tier 3 applications. Well, we've now see customers fully graduating to use Postgres for full enterprise class mission critical workloads. And it's in our interest to continue to work with you on that continuum by bringing technologies and improving the capabilities of Postgres. And you see some of the examples. We'll continue to prioritize performance and scalability. That's like breathing for our engineering team around EDB. We'll do more to help address pluggable storage and evolve the database platform to take advantage of new technical advancements and new performance attributes by having different storage mechanism. Replication has become incredibly important. We see availability. If you picked a single topic that our customers talk about maybe more than others today, it's availability, which relates heavily to the globalization of businesses and operations, such that you've got databases running in multiple locations now. So availability has become even more relevant. We're working with our replication technology to help in that area. And then, of course, the deployment of Postgres in hybrid cloud, multi-cloud across the globe. And so we continue to do important work in our roadmap around all of these areas. And I'm not sure if we have a roadmap session, but we have a couple online that we can share. And some of our guys will be here to talk to you a little bit about where we're headed with those directions. So I encourage you to stay and listen to some of those. But at the end of the day, we are only successful when we listen and hear from you those areas that are important for where you want to go next with Postgres. And we turn that into development and into roadmap so that we can give you a predictable and reliable outcome. So much of what defines a journey, right, is this durability and endurance. And I can tell you that after being here for 11 years, it's not easy to deliver that to the market. It's not easy to deliver that as a company. But it's something that I think we've done an extraordinarily good job at EDB in doing. Many of our customers continue to look at ways to migrate off of their existing platforms. And the most prominent of those is Oracle. There seems to be, continuous pressure, price pressure, as we hear from you often, about leaving Oracle. We're continuing to prioritize and emphasize the capabilities, tools, technologies to help you do it. So it's an important piece of the puzzle, and we know many of you are still moving in that direction. All of this has resulted in the growth in the ecosystem and the network to support the use and deployment successfully of Postgres. So in this room, we have both end users and customers. We also have a whole range of business partners, both systems integrators, consultants, distributor partners, who help bring together the capabilities that are necessary to deploy Postgres successfully at scale. And so this network really is you. And it's getting bigger and better and stronger. And events like this, which we're doing around the world, I think is an important forum, for all of you to get a chance to know each other, to meet each other, to learn what's available and what's possible in and around Postgres today. For EDB, it's hard to get that message out to everybody. So events like this, I really encourage you to spend time together and learn what's going on in that bigger network around you. This is you. Look, I said it earlier, I think as we look ahead, Postgres has become the de facto standard database, open source general purpose database for enterprise use. I don't think this is a debatable point at this point. I think that future for Postgres is really healthy and strong. And it'll be, I think when we come back here next year and the year after, we'll talk about this journey's evolution. And maybe we'll hit some road bumps along the way, but I think what we're going to continue to see is the future of Postgres taking shape around your interests and your needs. And I think that future is happening now, and we should see it continue well into the future. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and good luck.